the thing was that we were always looking for doing things differently, and I think that is also. I mean, if you look at like the red hoodie. I mean, actually, I've always been wearing red, so always also before like Rovio, and then red. Obviously the main character. If you look at Angry Birds and kind of like the iconic red bird. So then I actually went to a conference in Germany. Early days of Angry Birds, and then I was on a panel, and then I asked the people to take like a picture of me, sitting there, and then came back to Espoo to Rovio HQ, and then I showed that picture to everybody. Juhana Kotilainen was in our marketing, back then, and then immediately like everybody understood, because I explained that, hey, this is how you differentiate, this is how you stand out. And in that picture, you saw like 4 guys on a panel. 3 of them wearing, this kind of like business attire, dark suit and stuff like that, tie, and then 1 guy in a red hoodie. So, like, of course, you stand out. And I think that then after that, Juhana ordered like red Angry Birds hoodies for everybody, and that kind of became a bit of the company uniform. So every time, when a new person joined Rovio, you got your red Angry Birds hoodie, and then when you went somewhere, like the conference and all of that, and your story about Matt and me going to conferences, of course, then everybody came to you, because the Rovio people with the Angry Birds hoodie, it was very easy. Oh, you must work for Rovio, and then we should talk, and then so you didn't even.
We saw you from far away. We saw you from far away, man.
The Red Square, and there's actually like lots of like Russia stories, because I mean, big neighbor to the east for us. But one thing that we were also always looking for, things that we could do that would have kind of like a global impact, but then kind of like doing these local activities, like again launching Angry Birds Space in space, and at the same time we also took over the Space Needle in Seattle, because Space Needle, great. So we put red bird on the Space Needle, and still if you Google like Space Needle, many of the images that will come up will feature the Space Needle with a big red bird hanging from the side. But anyway, yeah, so then Red Square obviously has, like that kind of connotation, that it's like in Russia, and it's not like the easiest place to take over. And it took us actually a couple of years, and we had to do quite a bit to kind of like get there. And actually that's, like a long story in itself. But to shorten a bit, we actually then managed to take over the Red Square and brand it, and actually we were the main sponsor of this kind of like big celebration that they organize for the high school graduates in Russia. So every year the 6,000 best high school graduates get invited to the Kremlin, and there's a big event, and it's televised on national TV, and the best male and best female student, they get like a prize. Okay, when we were there, they got a huge Angry Birds plush toy, so like nice visibility on national TV and all of that. And then we also took over, we had a big concert. One thing that you can actually find if you Google Angry Birds Red Square, you'll see some of the things that we did there. But we actually organized like a big concert, and then preparing for that concert in the day, there are sound checks and everything, and then just told the people there that actually I could do my speech now. And then they started saying that, Peter, there's no mention about like any speech or anything like that. Then okay, my Russian friends say, okay, like Angry Birds, they're sponsoring this, and so it's okay. So then I managed to do my like victory speech in the Red Square, and I don't think that many people are like allowed to give talks in the Red Square, so that was like pretty cool. And also
you passed through the KGB. You passed through the KGB.
Yeah. But it was actually, and then we managed to make Russia one of the biggest markets for Angry Birds when it comes to licensing and everything. So also a bit of the kind of like attitude that everybody else was afraid of doing business in Russia because the crisis and everything. But we actually weren't afraid of doing that, and we also took like the Angry Birds soft drinks and made them #1 in Russia. So then
ahead of Coca-Cola, Angry Birds drinks were better sold than Coca-Cola in Russia that year.
Yeah. So then George Brody was the CMO of Coke. Actually, then invited us to meet with him and his team in Vegas for one event, and then he was telling the guys there that these guys are kicking your ass in Europe. What are you going to do about it? Because, Coke is not used to anybody beating them. Okay, we did, we beat them for like a couple of weeks time, but still, even that is like something that, Pepsi, for example,
shouldn't happen. It's the kind of things that shouldn't happen. It's like
cool.
a European team beating the Americans at basketball in the Olympics. It's not supposed to happen. Sometimes it does, but it shouldn't. You skipped a few details there. You said
one thing
how it happened is a story in and of itself, and I think it's an interesting one.
But one thing that I also, got started like the red hoodie thing and all of that. So also got invited then to this St. Petersburg Economic Forum, and there's also like a big story on like how I actually got there with various.
Can you say it? Can you say it? The plane story, the airport story.
Yeah. I mean, I got invited. Actually, we were talking to Juri Milner and the team at DST. So they're big investor in, or one of the first investors in Facebook and Zynga and many of these companies. And we were meeting with the team in London. And then I was, after the meeting, I was on my way to Heathrow. So we are in London. And then I get a call from the DST guys that, hey, Peter, there's like next Friday, there is this St. Petersburg Economic Forum, and would be great if you could be on the panel there. They've invited like Daniel Ek, and Juri Milner himself was on that. And then I think the CEO of Mail.ru, the company that Juri founded. Then
Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify.
Mary Meeker was there, a bunch of people, and like super kind of like influential like panel and all that. But then I immediately told them that, hey, that I'm going to be traveling. I think that, early in the week I was in the US, and then was going to this Mobile 2.0 event in Barcelona on, was it like Thursday? I think it was. It was Thursday, and Friday I was supposed to be in St. Petersburg. So I said that I don't have a visa for Russia, and I know that it can be very difficult to get that. And now we're talking about like very short period of time, and I'm not going to be in Finland. I'm actually traveling the whole week. And then they called me the following day and said that, okay, Peter, that it seems like it's going to be very difficult to get you the visa, by Friday, that there's only a week and you're like traveling all over the place. And I said, yeah, that's what I kind of like thought. And then they told me, but if it isn't too much trouble, we'll send a plane to pick you up in Barcelona. And I said, okay, maybe I can kind of like live with that, like if it doesn't like happen all the time. So then, basically Barcelona, Thursday afternoon, head to the airport, plane picks me up. I'm the only passenger. And then they tell me that, okay, so in order to get you the visa, we actually have to go through Moscow because you're going to get like a crew visa. I said, okay. And then
if you were a pilot.
yeah. And then we get to Moscow. Then we get stuck in this massive private jet traffic jam because all the influential Russians are going to St. Petersburg for this St. Petersburg Economic Forum. So then I arrive like late at night, and I have my crew visa, meaning that I walk into the country like the old airport, and like some bit different like path into the country. And
there's like a queue in the back door, basically. There's a VIP queue in the back door.
And then I end up in the middle of the street, in the middle of the night, and there's nobody there, and I don't know where to go. And then luckily there's a bit of a time difference, so I managed to get a hold of the team in London, and then say that, okay, I'm now like here, and there's nobody here. There was like supposed to be like a car or something picking me up. And of course, that guy had waited for me where like normal people get into the country. And then, okay, after, a bit of time, then we managed to connect. And then, I end up at the Economic Forum, like the next day on a panel with Daniel Ek and Mary Meeker and Juri Milner and all of these guys. And then we are talking about, I don't remember, maybe the future of the internet or something like super important. And then during our talk, the president and at that time, so that was when Medvedev was president. They took like turns so that Putin could get re-elected. And then Medvedev walks in, and then he listens to our panel. Then he asks for the microphone, and then he says that before we talk politics, I want to thank Rovio for bringing out Angry Birds and giving Russian bureaucrats something to do during their free time and during the working hours. It's okay as well. And he doesn't know how many Angry Birds games there are, but he's sure there's going to be many more, and they will be very, very successful. And then after the panel, media comes up to me and then asks me that, hey, that Peter, were you like surprised that the Russian president showed up at your panel? I said, no, I kind of like expected that, because we're talking about like very important things like the future of the internet and like all of that. And then they said that, but you must have been surprised that he talked about Angry Birds. I said, actually, not at all, because, look at the panel. You had, like 5 or 6 people on the panel, and everybody else, was wearing, more or less serious like business attire. And you have one guy in a red hoodie and red shoes. So what do you think he's going to talk about? And then after that, of course,
catching the eye
in Russia. It was, anyway, it was a good example of, again, like simple things, like red hoodie, standing out. And I think that in marketing, that has always been kind of like my thing, that you need to always think about how your product, your service, how is it different from everything else out there. And that's something that really is kind of like the most important thing, because every market has like an abundance of products and services. So you need to think about like why people should care about what you are doing, and typically they will care if you're different.